Welcome to the Grand Theft World podcast, sponsored by the fine members over at grandtheftworld.com. This is episode 131, and it's called A New Monarch Project. That, of course, refers to the recent coronation of King Chuckie the Third. It's no longer a queen of England. The queen has turned into a king. I'm not sure what kind of transition ceremony they had for that, but the coronation is something that brings up a lot of emotions in people who shouldn't really have emotional connections to kings and queens, but that's how powerful the propaganda is with that empire. It still exists, even though all this reason and logic exists, showing that kings and queens, they're obsolete, they're outdated. That type of rule over people by other human beings, claiming that they're related directly to God, is something I think that we need to outgrow.
Republic states on their website, as we approach Charles's coronation, the country needs an honest, grown-up debate about the monarchy. We need to stop and ask ourselves, can't we just choose our next head of state?
Charles, while we struggle to heat our homes, we have to pay for your parade.
Thank you for coming.
The taxpayer pays $100 million for you, and what for? Me from Brennan, not my king.
No, not everyone is happy about King Charles stepping into his mother's shoes, or diamond-encrusted loafers, or gold-plated clodhoppers, or whatever it is that monarchs wear to prevent their poor, delicate royal feet from touching the earth. But while most of the public's attention is falling on the obvious issues, the monarchy's increasing irrelevance to the 21st century, the colossal waste of taxpayer resources that go towards the upkeep of the world's richest family and their multiple palaces, the dark history of slavery and other colonial abuses for which royals of the past are responsible, few are aware of just how dark the history of the royal family is, or just how twisted Charles's vision for the future of the United Kingdom, and indeed the world, really is.
We have a golden opportunity to seize something good from this crisis. Its unprecedented shockwaves may well make people more receptive to big visions of change, and global crises like pandemics and climate change know no borders and highlight just how interdependent we are as one people sharing one planet. And as we move from rescue to recovery, therefore, we have a unique but rapidly shrinking window of opportunity to learn lessons and reset ourselves on a more sustainable path. It is an opportunity we have never had before and may never have again. So we must use all the levers we have at our disposal, knowing that each and every one of us has a vital role to play. Everything I have tried to do and urge over the past 50 years has been done with our children and grandchildren in mind. So I can only encourage us all to think big and act now.
The Godfather, not of soul. We're not going to talk about James Brown. We're going to talk about the Godfather of AI. And he left Google, not because it's time for him to retire and go quietly into his after corporate work. No, he's got a message for the world, warning against the fact that this AI type of project, artificial life, artificial consciousness, artificial intelligence, there's no moats being built around these things. And the people who are building things are so concerned with progressing the technology that maybe they're overstepping some of the safeguards and logic and reason that we've used to continue existing on this planet for millions of years. They're bringing us closer and closer to the brink of the end of humanity.
Jeffrey, thanks so much for joining us. So you left your job with Google in part because you say you want to focus solely on your concerns about AI. You've spoken out saying that AI could manipulate or possibly figure out a way to kill humans? How could it kill humans?
Well, eventually, if it gets to be much smarter than us, it'll be very good at manipulation because it will have learned that from us. And there are very few examples of a more intelligent thing being controlled by a less intelligent thing. And it knows how to program, so it'll figure out ways of getting around restrictions we put on it. It'll figure out ways of manipulating people to do what it wants.
Steve Wozniak, one of the co-founders of Apple, is also speaking out about the dangers he fears will come from AI. Take a listen.
Now AI is another more powerful tool, and it's going to be used by those people, for basically really evil purposes. And I hate to see technology being used that way. It shouldn't be, and probably some types of regulation are needed.
It sounds like you agree. What
I agree with that. Yes.
Yeah. What should that regulation look like?
I'm not an expert on how to do regulation. I'm just a scientist who suddenly realized that these things are getting smarter than us. And I want to sort of blow the whistle and say we should worry seriously about how we stop these things getting control over us. And it's going to be very hard. And I don't have the solutions. I wish I did.
Does there need to be a meeting of all of the tech groups and governments working on this, Google, China, whatever, and some sort of set of rules of the road? I mean, how do we even protect against bad actors or rogue nations harnessing AI?
So for some things, it's very hard, like them using AI for manipulating electorates or for fighting wars with robot soldiers. But for the existential threat of AI taking over, we're all in the same boat. It's bad for all of us. And so we might be able to get China and the US to agree on things like that. It's like nuclear weapons. If there's a nuclear war, we all lose. And it's the same if these things take over.
Fox ratings, for some reason, in the past week, have dropped as if they are the stock of Budweiser, and no one's sure why 50% of the audience isn't showing up to watch Fox News anymore. They're completely befuddled over there. We're gonna have to do a deep dive into why that might be going on. Whitney Webb, there's new names coming out, new documents with Jeffrey Epstein, and it's not the current CIA director, Bill Burns, who's shown up on the Epstein calendar. Maybe that's how he got the rise to fame to be director of CIA in the first place.
Yeah, so the Wall Street Journal, as far as regarding how it got these documents, as far as I've seen, there's been no transparency there, and none of the documents that they've reported on have been released, and it's still not clear how they obtained them or from whom, or why it's coming out now. So the second part that came out today that you're referring to has a lot of names that are not really that new in relation to the Epstein scandal. People like Larry Summers, Glenn and Ava Dubin, Bill Gates, of course. These are names that have been circulating around Epstein since at least 2019, if not earlier. Now, I've had a little more time to think about why they might be putting this out there now, and I think the answer may be to take heat off of the 4 billionaires who were subpoenaed as part of this U.S. Virgin Island JP Morgan Epstein case, because those are very astounding. So one of the more astounding ones, there's two that really stick out there. One is Sergey Brin, the Google co-founder. And the other one is Michael Orvitz, who used to be head of Walt Disney and a top talent agent for Hollywood. So, so the fact that those two individuals were subpoenaed by the USVI, which is in possession of lots of documents about Epstein's activities in JP Morgan and how they relate to his sex trafficking activities, the fact that they subpoenaed 4 billionaires, the other two are Thomas Pritzker of Hyatt Hotels, whose family has long-standing intelligence and organized crime connections that I detail in my book. And then the other one is Mort Zuckerman, who bought the New York Daily News after Robert Maxwell's death, Maxwell having been the previous owner, and Zuckerman was known to frequent Epstein's townhouse. A lot of that isn't necessarily that revelatory on that end, but having the Google co-founder be that close to Epstein and having a former Walt Disney president being that close to Epstein are pretty significant. And as far as the Disney ties go, when Orvitz was head of Disney, the head of the Imagineering department at Disney was a guy named Brand Farron. And while Farron was in that role at Disney, he was advising the U.S. military, intelligence, all sorts of shady actors. And he brought to the Imagineering department close associates of Epstein like Marvin Minsky and Danny Hillis, who were very closely involved with the development of military supercomputers, creating artificial intelligence, all sorts of very odd things. And the fact that they'd be involved in a company like Disney, which of course targets mainly children. And of course, Minsky was named, for example, as being a key part of the sex trafficking operations by people like Virginia Giuffre, for example. This is pretty astounding. So the fact that we're having these names come out with the Wall Street Journal piece, people are now instead talking about Noam Chomsky, talking about Bill Gates, and not talking about these people who have been subpoenaed in a legal case about Epstein's sex trafficking network. No one's talking about them. Instead, it's talking about these meetings on their calendars, right? And so like someone like Chomsky, who, as far as the Wall Street Journal reported, had 3 meetings with him, that I don't see that as being as significant, for example, as, these 4 billionaires who have been subpoenaed, but that's getting no coverage. So I would suspect it's to take heat off of some of these guys, if you ask me.
It's sad, but the CDC has lost Rochelle Walensky. She's no longer going to be up there telling people what they should do in the name of the Tony Fauci science. She's no longer there as the spokesperson for Bill Gates. So we're going to check into why did she step down? Why is she leaving? What's going on over there? Because she has been such a big positive influence in so many people's lives over the past 3 years. So we're going to be concerned with the future there.
CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky announced today that she's stepping down at the end of June. Walensky helped oversee the Biden administration's COVID response as the nation emerged from lockdowns. No word yet on her replacement. Walensky's departure comes as the U.S. government is set to end the COVID public health emergency next week. Also today, the World Health Organization declared an end to the global emergency phase of the pandemic, but cautions thousands are still dying from the virus every week.
Also, we have a story from Redacted, how the World Economic Forum controls everything. Klaus Schwab and his coterie, but Schwab's he's a lower level management guy. He's an implementer. He's one out there that has to go to these meetings and be the front man. He is a representative of some very powerful elites who don't have to go on stage and show themselves or disclose their names. So we're going to get to who pulls the strings on the World Economic Forum.
Many governments have been implementing many of their policies, not just in the United States, but in France and New Zealand and Canada and Australia, Ireland, the Netherlands. The list is actually frighteningly long. How does this happen? How did they get so strong? Well, it turns out that the World Economic Forum has a very good farm system. It's like Major League Baseball and the minor league baseball teams. Like they farm it out and they start them young. A grooming program, if you will, called the Young Global Leaders of the World Economic Forum. Now, we've covered this a bit on the show, but I want to do more of a deep dive now, because what they do is they seek you out. They groom you. They place you into this program. There's just one caveat. You need to be young. You need to be 40 or under so that you can then infiltrate these governments and do the bidding of the World Economic Forum.
It's like a kids club.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's like, okay, we're getting you started young. We're getting you started so you can be indoctrinated and then rise up inside of this organization. Now, the expose did a great job cataloging just a few of these World Economic Forum young leaders who ended up infiltrating these governments and then running the show, basically. And they explain, quote, the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leaders program, founded in 2004, is designed to cultivate a network of exceptional individuals under the age of 40 from various fields, including business, politics, academia. Schwab has openly admitted that these young global leaders are infiltrating governments around the world. And he gloats about it, by the way. So let's just start with Justin Trudeau as an example here, the Prime Minister of Canada, dictator Justin Trudeau. Trudeau has implemented dystopian policies that align with, of course, a lot of what the World Economic Forum wants and their globalist vision for the world. Here are just a few examples. Carbon pricing and climate change policies, according to the expose. Trudeau's government has implemented a carbon pricing system, which is exactly what the WEF wants, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, aligning with the World Economic Forum's focus on sustainability, environmental responsibility. Also, internet regulation. We've been covering the internet regulation here on the show from Trudeau for many, many months now. Of course, in the wake of the trucker convoy and all of the clampdowns on free speech and misinformation and disinformation that he loves to talk about, right? They've absolutely pushed for measures that could infringe on freedom of speech in that country. That's exactly what the World Economic Forum wants. Pandemic response, right? The COVID-19 response. Trudeau's government has implemented all sorts of measures to control the spread of COVID-19, pushing lockdowns, of course, travel restrictions, and vaccine mandates. Although last week he tried to rewrite history and pretend that he didn't push people to get vaccines at all, which was laughable. And then he acknowledged that there's problems with the vaccines. He started saying that for the first time, like he's trying to rewrite history. All of these measures that we talked about, and there's more, of course, his clampdowns on the media, picking and choosing what media gets to have an audience with the government of that country, or registering to be a media organization, a news organization, only if you ask favorable questions or you are ideologically aligned with the Trudeau government. Here is
transhumanism by way of, human-assisted suicide for just people who are depressed.
Yeah, and leading the push on that, right? Like talk about the transhumanism, like you feel depressed? Well, why not take some pills to end your life early?
Yeah.
Yeah, forgot about that one. Let's add that to the list. Here's Klaus Schwab praising Trudeau, one of his young proteges.
But what we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina, and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more, half of this cabinet are for our actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
We're going to kick off tonight with the bestpoliticaltshirts.com creator. He is the creator of wearechange.org, Luke Rudowski, an investigation into these topics. Hang in there.
California, usually on fire, but mostly environmentally friendly, is something CNN would say about that clip.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions. We can get into the show, we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come on.